A very good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everyone present at the Data AI Summit. Today, I will be presenting along with my colleague Vinamra Dar, and we will be presenting our work on detecting anomalous behavior with surveillance analytics. So there will be two speakers today, both from Kushagramati Analytics. We are a Bangalore-based firm who consults with Databricks. And the two speakers are Vinamra Dar and Vishant Sanjay, which is me. We're both data scientists for Kushagramati Analytics. So the agenda for today would be discussing the popular analysis tools that are used in surveillance data, the challenges that exist in the existing solutions, our proposed solution and demonstration, and architecting the same for scale. So the popular use cases that are available for surveillance analytics are primarily of security and monitoring types, but there are also a few miscellaneous ones that we'll be going through. So starting with the security use cases, we look at physical role-based access management. So this will aid physical access management for different roles in different working capacities. Looking at violent behavior detection in public spaces. So the governments or local jurisdictions can work on reducing and deterring crime using violent behavior detection with an automated model. So this can be important in terms of notifying a nearby police station while something like this occurs, and also be used in terms of the charges that will be laid on a person for committing an illegal activity this way. So also we can look at crime and intrusion alerts. So this will primarily refer to a residential or a commercial complex where we're looking at preventing trespassing and various other crimes that can be detected using surveillance. So essentially, trespassing would be the primary focus of such a case. Looking forward into the monitoring, so flag and log activity and creating searchable events. This will be crucial in reducing the time in terms of looking for an anomaly or a crime committed, because we have a searchable log, which will be a lot easier than going through all the data. Now, looking at trend forecasting. So for retail businesses, we can look at forecasting the foot traffic data, which can be similarly done in government infrastructure and housing plans as well. So the idea is to train a model based on a regular footfall and predict it using trend forecasting ML models. Further, we can look at the COVID protocols in public spaces. So this is something that's been implemented by the team at Kushagramati, which we'll not be demonstrating today, but you can always reach out to us for the same. COVID protocols such as social distancing can be done using machine learning and ensuring such things. So for example, we can create a model that detects this, and the minute that it does not adhere to the prefix conditions, it can give us an alert. So fire and other safety protocols. So for example, integrating fire alarms with your current surveillance tools, as well as simply detecting a fire. So various things like that can be integrated into a surveillance analytics solution. So for the miscellaneous part, we can speak with respect to illegal parking, or if someone has, say, a traffic violation, the government authorities can use license plate recognition to both, say, send a fine as well as understand who's committing this traffic violation. Looking at infrastructure bottlenecks and unused spaces. So a heat map analysis is currently being conducted in various industries to ensure that there aren't too many unused spaces in the shops as well as in industrial places such as factories, etc. Looking at the automation and customer intelligence solutions, we primarily look at this based on each client. So you can automate customer intelligence solutions, but it must be client-based. It is tailored towards that specific client. I will be speaking about the challenges in traditional surveillance. So the challenges in traditional surveillance are as follows. Primarily, monitoring manually is an error-prone slow activity simply because of the fact that it requires a lot of manpower and introduces human bias. So human bias could be anything in terms of two people having a liking for each other, so preventing unacceptable behavior versus two people conspiring to do something. So human biases tend to play a role in the error as well as just plain human error. So it's expensive to scale for the same reason. So we're looking at limited integration of various other tools as well. So how do we tackle this? We tackle it by building these following use cases. So the three use cases that we have built are will be primarily focusing on the abandoned object detection, but we have also worked on loitering and unauthorized individual detection, as well as unauthorized vehicle entry or location detection. So for example, when we speak with respect to loitering, if this is a bank, like in the use case, a person is walking about continuously for an extended period of time for say 10 days, 12 days. So it seems to be someone conspiring to do something illegal. And that is what we look at detecting, as well as unauthorized vehicles for the same reason. And abandoned objects would essentially refer to anything like when someone throws a bag and runs away, right? So you know there is malicious intent there. Looking at our architecture diagram, so video feed is an unstructured kind of data. We gather the video feed through the real-time streaming protocol, otherwise known as the RTSP protocol. So we access the information on the camera through the DVR using the real-time streaming protocol. Once this occurs, we store the data and we implement some cleansing and pre-processing steps such as background subtraction, erosion and dilation, and the generation of a time average frame. Object detection is our final stage where we look at our abandoned objects, loitering individuals, and unauthorized vehicles. And once these events occur or they are logged, they are essentially put into our searchable log, which resides in the central management system or the central monitoring system. So how do we access the video feed? Like I said, we use the RTSP protocol and a video object. A video capture object is what we use. And the general format of the RTSP protocol, as you can see, requires the credentials as well as the camera number. Looking at the steps that we implement for pre-processing and cleansing of the video data. So primarily, we require low latency and a fluent frame rate for it to be a viable solution. So what we do is we let the video object skip certain frames if they aren't received in time to prevent the overloading of the protocol. As well as we implement grayscaling to obtain the binary format of the scaled frame. So the pre-processing steps are listed on the right-hand side of the slide, which include grayscaling, Gaussian blur, background subtraction, erosion, and dilation. So the key modules with regard to video processing are as follows. Background subtraction. So if we're looking at extrapolating a foreground object from the background, so for example, a bag that is not attended is an anomaly, and how would we separate that from the background? So we look to pick that specific object using background subtraction. Erosion and dilation are two techniques that we use to ensure that the contours are complete and clear. This is done to ensure correct detection. So the generation of a time average frame, this is a crucial step in our process, simply because the generation of a time average frame will prevent everyday behavior from looking anomalous. So for example, if we are sitting in an office environment and there are staplers, there are different office tools that really reside on a particular table, those objects should not be detected as anomalous. And that is why we use a time average frame. So looking further in terms of object recognition itself, we've used OpenCV for simple objects like boxes, but we've also taken it a step further and used pre-trained models which were trained on the COCO dataset, which is an industry standard. And we use this for more complex objects such as people, vehicles, etc. So finally, we also implement a certain threshold. So we reduce the false positive detection. So I'll be handing it over to Vinamra now, and he will be taking you through a demo of our solution.
Thank you, Rishan. I'll move over to the demo aspect of our solution and showcase how exactly we'll be working on the abandoned object detection itself. Yeah. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Rishan, for the introduction and also discussing the overall agenda of today's demo. This will be the technical description and the technical brief and the technical demonstration that I'll be beginning now. So I'll be sharing my notebook in a bit as well, and I'll also be showing you a demonstration of a live recorded real-time solution that we built on abandoned object. We shall be showcasing you basically when we drop an object and we pick it up, both the distance of a person from the bag itself and how much time, that distance was apart for both these particular identifiers. That is what will define the use case for abandoned object detection. Similarly, we've built our solution for other use cases as well, like loitering individuals. When individuals are particularly loitering in an area, we count the number of individuals. We also do a little bit of COVID social monitoring on them particularly. We also have vehicle detection as a use case that we built currently. So some of these are the use cases that we built today. Because of time restrictions, we'll be only demoing the first use case, that's the abandoned object. Thanks a lot, Rashan, for describing it so well. So overall, I'll first take you through the sort of code that we've built around it. So this is a Conda environment that we built it on. We called it Garuda because that's the code name of a project. And we particularly had these libraries and modules that we utilized. We had CV2, obviously OpenCV we require. There's NumPy for arrays. So any sort of image manipulation you'll be doing, you shall require NumPy as a module as well. You have requests, immutals, and argparses. These are all utility sort of items that are there. There's TensorFlow. Obviously, that's the object detection and the person detection pre-trained model that we're using. For abandoned object, we had to build our own sort of understanding of it, and we built it using OpenCV. We'll show you that in a minute. Import math. So math is, again, when you're using any of the math functions directly, it's a lot more easier as well. And some of the utilities for video streams, frames per second, just to maintain a constant fluid frame per second so that there are no frame drops, particularly there in the video as well. So this is the overall class that we defined. So the basic use that we had, if Rashan discussed, was also that we had a lot of different pre-trained models and a lot of different data sets that we could, also further train them on. Basically, our issue was that there were a lot of models and we were having different computational requirements. So there might be some of our clients which might have GPU servers at their location or at their DVR location. Those are very helpful because then we can do a lot of quick detector API according to their models, and we can have some really highly accurate models, but which are also computationally being quite expensive itself. Those are things that varied itself according to computation needs. Some of our clients only had enough CPU power. They did not have a lot of GPU power. They had probably a very basic integrated GPU, particularly within their systems. So for those also, we had a lower model that we particularly used. Obviously, the accuracy took a hit, but it was good enough for our solutions to still run accurately for the business requirement for that particular client as well. So for that reason, we had the detector class API. Whatever model that you've created, whatever model you've deployed, if that model is fixed as per the drift happening, you can pre-train it on, or you can pre-train it, or using a lot of transfer learning methodologies. You can train for your particular use case as well. We found that to be quite useful before inputting our model into our use case as well. Secondly, we're processing some frames. So this is just the frame rate we're getting for each and every single frame. We're getting what the boxes are. So this also was not just for person detection, but it was also for cars, some of the suitcases, some balls. So different objects that were being detected by this dataset was using the COCO dataset, as we mentioned earlier, and the MobileNet SSD model that we particularly had for our use case, right? So within that, we were scoring each and every bounding box or each and every object that was detected. We also had boxes that were just a bounding box that we formed over them, and which class they belong to. So it could be person and different objects type, that is. And number is something that's particularly of the count, the number of objects. And also, it also helped us maintain how many, maintain the overall accuracy. So the system didn't crash. If, let's say we were running on something with CPU, we sort of reduced this number itself. We had a cap on the number of individuals loitering. That could have been, another use case that we built. Yeah, so that is our detector class API that we defined. Then we move on to the actual implementation of these functions and class objects. So we had the model part, like we discussed the SSD MobileNet, which is built on the COCO. Yes, so this is also very gold standard for most of these data sets that were used. Then there's Director API, which we had for defined for this model path. Then the threshold for a person. So we had a 0.5 threshold. We also tested with 0.6 and 0.7. Between 0.5 to 0.7, it should work on your use case. For person center, we initialize some of the variables and some of the lists. And basically, this is a while loop which opens up the object, the image object, and starts taking in the frames from the camera itself. It goes to the DVR using the RTSP protocol that we discussed before, and then it goes on to manipulate each and every single frame. So here we are only getting for the class which is human, which detects people, and the threshold, which is 0.5. Which was defined earlier. And then according to that, we build boxes around it and we put the text person. And if there was no person found, then we just had a person center as 00, which would be the leftmost, top left corner of your frame. Then we also differentiated using absolute difference in the reference image. This is particularly important because we discussed time average frame. This is also something that I'll be showcasing you within demonstration. You'll be a lot more clearer then. But basically what we're doing is we're trying to extract the foreground objects from the background. And for that, our reference image needs to be quite good. So this reference image with some of the use cases became quite good. If we took a reference for a time average frame, for some use cases, we also use adaptive thresholding, which is another method in which you want to extract the foreground objects as well. But some common things that were used after this were the contouring part. So the image dilation or the image erosion that might be required. Those things are something that, we particularly also had within different use cases. It wasn't quite required for the first use case though. Then we just created into the gray frame. So this is still RGB colored frame, which is, differentiating from the reference frame. Also quite a lot more accurate as well. Then we created into grayscale so that we can do other manipulations, like we thresholded and found the different contours on it. After that, we build bounding boxes around each of those contours. And if the contour is above a certain limit, that 1,000 pixels and less than 20,000, which means that it was not like small boxes, which were, an error or something that's not particularly correct. And also width and height. So for extremely long vertical objects with small heights, which areas would still be bigger than this, but the width might be smaller. So those things, were removed, and also the height being to that level. And yeah, we appended that all to a list for those particular counters. We appended to the LST list. And for all those LST objects that we found, we checked whether or not those objects relied on different frames. Also, whether those objects were, a particular distance from the person object as well. And we also had then the time itself that we had built into this as well. This all also maintained the FPS in the background. That is something that the detector class API itself also takes care of as well. You can also help using the key function. So this also changes to what extent you want to do. So if you want a slightly more fluid frame, you can increase the number on this. If you want to have a slightly more, frame which is more real time. So it's a trade-off between real time versus fluency. And it also depends on your computational needs that you might have or you might not have particularly. So I'll just showcase the demo now. So as you can see, this is the real-time frame which is coming. Smooth this right here. Yeah, this is the real-time frame which is coming. This is also time averaging the frame right now. So what's happening is it's creating a time average frame of all these pixel values which are coming in. Right now, these are fairly constant. It also helps us remove any objects just statically there, or even adjust for brightness values over a period of days. So we take a 24-hour long, time average frame. Then we want to also adjust for brightness or different contrast levels in a deployed scenario. Here you see I drop the bag in and I come back. It tries to detect if it's an abandoned object or not. after a few checks, basically distance and time, it detects this abandoned object, both in the video frame. This is also something that we're demoing right now to show how the code exactly works. But when in a deployed solution, we don't particularly need to be seeing this frame. So all the computational requirement of actually displaying the frame on a screen will also go away. You will have a system which will detect the alarm and trigger the alarm. Like you see here, we print out a statement, the alarm was successfully triggered. This is basically triggering the alarm and sending this frame of video. So 30 seconds or 3 minutes, whatever be the sort of requirement by the client, we could have that part of the video sent to the central monitoring system, which will monitor the video and tell us whether this event was something that was correctly triggered or was the alarm correctly triggered or not. So it'll test for different use cases. This also helps us send all these videos into the Delta Lake format and into something that we call as a summarized video format, right? Which helped us particularly get what is the summary video. So we don't have to go through hours and hours long, video feed. We can only rely on these short snippets of feed and can extract a lot of value from them. So this also makes a lot of surveillance systems be very, very, autonomous, but also something being very efficient use of your manpower that will be there. We'll further move on to the metrics aspect of it. As you saw, the video was quite good, of like pretty high FPS as well. I thank everyone for this. Thank you. Some of the key metrics that we were able to track from our particular solution was we were able to get 25 to 30 frames per second on a GPU enabled system. This is also something that's a standard for the sort of pre-trained models and data set that we used for, and we got really high accuracy rates as well. Some of the business impacts of our solution would be that the video feed can be summarized by the activity log of searchable events. So like Rishan was mentioning earlier, the problem in traditional surveillance analytics is that there's hours and hours of footage that individuals manually have to go through to understand, where an anomaly happened or where a crime might have happened. This also is very post facto, particularly. So something, if we can make it automated solution and something can be an activity log of searchable events. So you can just search particularly and go back to that particular event and see what exactly went wrong, who committed that particular crime. It'll become a lot easier in terms of the business impact. You'll also reduce the sort of scale because when you scale out to big complexes, having like many cameras across large area and like large sections of space, we think that like you also need a lot more manpower itself. There's a cost reduction when you scale that, when you scale our solution particularly. We also think that AI significantly increases accuracy and improves responsiveness because now you're no longer waiting on a human to commit an error or human biases to creep in particularly. That's something that going to be a lot more accurate itself. Some key considerations to note in terms of going forward with our solution. Since video data itself is quite large in nature, it's also quite unstructured. We do require GPU-based computing to be quite critical, especially if you're doing real-time surveillance analytics and you're deploying this in a real-time solution like we have. It's something that you will require a GPU-based solution, a graphical processing unit itself. There's also network latency that needs to be taken care of. It's the presence of delay in real time that might happen. So there might be internet bandwidth issues, which might create issues in terms of the packets reaching, this place where the video is being processed. Those might also create some sort of lag in terms of the accuracy. Those are some key considerations to note. In terms of Databricks Delta, we think that when we're creating that summarized video data, Databricks Delta helps in like efficiently probing of that summarized data. You see how activity log can be created using Databricks Delta, and you can pick and choose which exact anomaly you want to probe into and like sort of investigate a lot more. That's something that can be efficiently done using Databricks Delta. Lastly, object detection and tracking models become significantly easy using MLflow management. So experiment management. So something like when you're like using a lot of, image detection models, or you're using people detection models in like, in deployment, a lot of drift can happen, which means that your models are no longer accurate in itself. To keep your models up to date and constantly improving, you can have MLflow experiment management, which can help you do that task quite efficiently. How we scale this particular solution with Databricks itself. So we're looking at a lot of sensors, IoT, a lot of unstructured data that's particularly coming in. This could be burglar alarms, this could be fire alarms, this could be any kind of sensors, even motion detectors could be like you could be getting data from that. You also have activity log, which is like the searchable event activity log that could be present, and the video feed that's coming in. So all of that is ingested using the data store or data factory into the data lake storage. So the Delta format really helps us, like I explained, in terms of pinpointing to what exact anomaly you want to go back into, and like which exact searchable event you want to go back into, and investigate that particular event itself. Delta Lake is really helpful for scaling that solution itself. In terms of prepping and training with MLflow experiment management, like I explained in the previous slide, it's really helpful in terms of deploying and keeping models quite up to date itself. So the three use cases that we dealt with were abandoned object detection. So when my individual might abandon an object and move away from it. It could also be loitering individuals, when individuals loiter around in an area or in a zone, particularly, or unauthorized vehicles. So when vehicles are parking in illegal parking areas, or when they're going where they're not supposed to be going, those and more solutions are something that we can scale with Databricks particularly. And all of these activities can be logged and summarized into the central monitoring system itself. In terms of the conclusions, we sort of demonstrated video analytics on a live surveillance feed. We used open source packages and frameworks like OpenCV, NumPy, TensorFlow, and Keras, and many more. We developed a real-time surveillance analytics pipeline. We showed you how we can scale it with Databricks as well. For any feedback, please feel free to reach out to us on sales@kmadi.in. You can also discuss with us about different surveillance analytics use cases that we've particularly built, and we're looking forward to build with you. Thanks a lot, everyone, for your time.